The Detroit Pistons had a very successful rebuilding season. They finished the year 23-59, good enough to make them tied for the best odds in the NBA at the number 1 overall pick. Cade Cunningham had a very good Rookie of the Year and has a legitimate case to win Rookie of the Year, even if he is unlikely to do so, and will most certainly be a lock for all rookie first team. Saddiq Bey had great moments after a slow start to the year, and there were some smart moves made by the front office that will result in more benefits for the Pistons moving forward. So let's talk about the Pistons heading into the next season and what the future holds for this organization. Let's start with all of the positive signs for the Detroit Pistons for the 2021-22 season and talk about their current young core. Cade Cunningham is the centerpiece of the Detroit Pistons rebuild, and he was the centerpiece of any success for the Pistons this past season, which has resulted in Cade being named as a Rookie of the Year finalist and will be a first-team All-Rookie member. After missing time early on in the start of the season, he had a bit of a slow start, and in turn, it did hurt his potential Rookie of the Year race contention. But ultimately, he had a very successful season, and throughout his rookie year displayed upside as an elite level 3 level scorer, elite playmaking, very good rebounding skills at the guard position, while being able to be a good defender with his additional length and size at the guard spot being very impactful on that end as well as on offense. Cade has the potential to be a future all-star while being able to impact the game in every way. Any Pistons fan has to be very happy to have Cade Cunningham as your franchise cornerstone moving forward. Saddiq Bey started very slowly and poorly in his sophomore season, but over the final 2/3 of the year was quite good. The only thing that was slightly concerning for Saddiq was that his efficiency across the board did take a bit of a drop this year, but a lot of that was due to that poor start and even out over his back half of the year. It's about where it was in his rookie season. He has continued to show that when he is locked in on offense, he is extremely good, and it is extremely hard to get him out of his rhythm. His inconsistencies at times are to his detriment, and hopefully he can become more consistent as time moves on. But for the time being, there's no doubt he's a very good three-point shooter. He's starting to be able to create a little bit more of his offense, and is going to be a very good 3-and-D wing, especially if he continues to increase his efficiency over time on a competitive roster. For the time being, he'll remain more than a 3-and-D wing. But on a competitive roster, he's likely a 3-and-D wing, who I still think has very much more upside on the defensive end than he has shown, and has the potential to be a very valuable piece of this Pistons team moving forward. When we discuss the core moving forward of the Detroit Pistons, we have to talk about Marvin Bagley, one of the most under the radar and small on paper moves that was made at the deadline, that if anyone was talking about it, it was about Donte DiVincenzo going to the Kings, or it was Serge Ibaka going to the Bucks as the most important, most talked about pieces of the trade. But Marvin Bagley going to the Pistons was arguably the most significant addition of any team in this 4-team trade. Marvin Bagley looked the happiest he's been on a basketball court in a very long time in Detroit towards the end of the season, played some of the best basketball of his career towards the end of the season, and ultimately, as someone who came into the league with high expectations and high upside, could be someone of value long-term for this Pistons franchise. Now, whether he becomes more than what he has shown over the last couple of months in Detroit remains to be seen, but there's no doubt that he can be a valuable NBA piece moving forward. Is he going to be a future star, as many had hoped when he was drafted with the 2nd overall pick? That remains to be seen. But ultimately, he was drafted into the worst organization in basketball, and that obviously has not helped his development. And so there's no writing on the wall to say that Marvin Bagley can improve in Detroit over the next couple of years with more playing time in a better situation, and in a situation where he should get fairly regular playing time. Of course, he is a restricted free agent this summer. We'll talk about that more later when we talk about the Pistons offseason. But point being, Marvin Bagley is an important part of the Pistons' future. Isaiah Stewart had another fine year in the NBA. He continues to prove that he's a valuable NBA center. He's not elite by any stretch, but he plays with a lot of energy. He plays with a lot of determination, a lot of heart, sometimes too much when he tries to start a brawl. But point being, he plays with a lot of energy, and I can respect that, and I like having that, especially in a center who can get on the glass, can get rebounds, can get loose balls. There's nothing amazing about Isaiah Stewart. There's no doubt about it. He's not some elite level talent. If he's going to be a starter in the NBA at the center spot, he's not going to be some top 15 or even top 20 center. He's probably going to be a low-tier center or a backup center, but he's valuable. He can put up 10 and 8 or 8 and 10 on any given night with fairly good consistency, and will be a fine centerpiece for this Pistons team moving forward. Killian Hayes is probably the most controversial and most certainly the most disappointing of the Pistons' rapidly increasing young core. And after a disappointing rookie of the year in the NBA where he struggled with injuries early on at the start of the year and of course had limited playing time, he didn't really show anything better in year 2, and unfortunately there could be concern that another French guard taken in the lottery fails to live up to expectations, specifically a French point guard who is a bit tall and a bit long for the position, which can be certainly seen as a benefit, as it has been for both Killian Hayes and Ntilikina on the defensive end, but offensively, they haven't fully put it together. That could be the problem for Killian Hayes. However, I am not giving up on Killian Hayes anytime soon. Players do sometimes take until year 3 or year 4 to get comfortable in the NBA. That is not a rarity, especially given Hayes missed much of his first season in the NBA and is, in turn, yet to play 100 games in the NBA. He hasn't even played 100 games yet. He has shown some upside as a passer, can be a very good defender, but his scoring game and his offensive game as a whole consistently just needs to become much improved to become a valuable NBA guard. Something that does not look likely at the moment, but certainly should not be ruled out. And in its a whole, Killian Hayes as a prospect could not yet be written off from being an NBA talent. Give him another 70 games in the league, we'll talk again. The Detroit Pistons have one of the worst pick collections of any rebuilding team in the NBA. However, they have their own picks for the most part, aside from a first-round pick that will be owed to OKC at some point. It does have protections through 2027, but most Pistons fans, as well as the Pistons organization, would like to think that they will be competitive before 2027. So at some point in time, they will be giving up a first. The most important part of this Pistons offseason and their most valuable asset to this offseason is their first-round pick, which they will have as good of odds of anyone as getting the first overall pick once again. They will have a chance to acquire another elite talent to add alongside Cade and Saddiq Bey, hopefully someone that can be that co-star to Cade Cunningham. The next most pressing issue is Marvin Bagley's restricted free agency. He will demand a new contract, but no one really knows what that value is going to be. There isn't much of a precedent or a benchmark for what type of money Marvin Bagley will command, what his agents and Marvin Bagley's camp will want, what other teams across the league would be willing to give him as a restricted free agent, and what the Pistons will be willing to give him. It is very, very hard to predict because this is a former second overall pick, which is why there is so much stock in him and why there is so much potential that he could get a significant term and money value. But yet, he has dealt with off-the-court problems. He hasn't been great on the court at times. Of course, he looked quite good in Detroit. But what do you give him? Is this a 1-year deal? Is this a 2-year deal? Is this a 4-year deal? How much is he making a year? I have no idea. I have no idea. If you have any bit of a guess, be sure to let me know down in the comments. But Marvin Bagley's market value might be the hardest to predict of anyone heading into free agency this summer. Regardless of what that value is, the Pistons have plenty of cap space, and so unless Marvin Bagley comes in asking like 4 years, $20 million a year, I would expect the Pistons will probably bring him back. I think he's an important part of their core moving forward. I think he showed enough over his audition, essentially, post-trade deadline with the Pistons last year to earn a new contract from the Pistons, and I would expect to see him in a Pistons jersey come the start of next season. The other important decision the Pistons have to consider heading into this offseason is about Jeremy Grant. The Jeremy Grant signing was great. What was considered an overpay by many at the time, me included, has turned out quite good. Jeremy Grant improved his game, became a much more complete offensive player than pretty much anyone had ever expected from him. But now there's only 1 year left on his deal. And so the Pistons front office have to make a decision. Their options? Do we trade Jeremy Grant by the trade deadline? Or do we re-sign him? To me, there are no other options. Sure, there is the option where Jeremy Grant plays for Detroit throughout the entirety of the season and then walks as a free agent. But that is not a viable, positive option for this Pistons front office as far as I'm concerned. This is still a rebuilding team, regardless of how high you are on this Pistons group next year. Jeremy Grant being on this team for the entirety of the year, or for at least before the trade deadline and then not post-trade deadline, is not going to be the difference between the Pistons being some great team or not being some great team. We'll talk more about my expectations for them next year, but honestly, this Eastern Conference is just so filled with good teams right now. The Pistons just aren't good enough to compete for even a play-in spot as far as I'm concerned next season, regardless of whether Jeremy Grant is there or not. You cannot lose Jeremy Grant for nothing. He either has to be re-signed or he needs to be moved for assets. You cannot lose a player the caliber of Jeremy Grant for nothing if you're a rebuilding team like the Pistons. And some minor notes, Kelly Olynyk only has one fully guaranteed season left on his deal, so expect he is moved by next year's trade deadline, and Rodney McGruder is a free agent in this offseason, and so don't be shocked if he moves elsewhere. The 2022-23 Detroit Pistons should be an improvement from their 2021-22 version. Cade and Saddiq, amongst others, will hopefully take a step forward in their development, and another young asset will be added in the first round. The only way I don't see this Pistons team improving from a record standpoint and a performance standpoint is if Jeremy Grant is traded before the season, and even then, I think it's still quite possible this team improves. However, even though I do think improvements are coming for this Pistons team, you have to consider how good the top of the Eastern Conference is, specifically the top 10 teams that were in the play-in or the playoffs this season, all of which were above 500. The Pistons had 23 wins last year, and personally, I don't see how the Pistons improve by 18 wins to meet that type of record to get to 500 for next season. Not to say that that's where the records will be at next year in the East, but I don't think it'll be far off at the very least. This is also not considering the fact that the Wizards, when healthy with Kristaps and Beal, could be competitive next year. The Magic, I think, will be significantly improved. And who's to say what will happen with the Knicks yet? There's just no way the Pistons are going to be good enough to make the play-in tournament next year. Long term, they still have upside. But Cade has to develop more. A couple of more assets have to be developed. I think some more internal development has to happen either from guys like Saddiq Bey or the guys they drafted in the first round this year. They're still a ways away from competing for a postseason appearance. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's going to be another year where they can focus on internal development, focus on adding another high-end first-round pick. But they need to add some more of those assets, and Cade Cunningham needs to make the leap to stardom. And then this Pistons team can start to push towards playoff appearances, something that I think they will do, but they need a bit more time. And if Cade turns into a superstar, and they add the right pieces around him, well, then the sky is the limit. But this is a crucial offseason and reaching that potential and being able to have the sky be the limit. From their first-round draft pick to the Marvin Bagley contract to what they do or don't do with Jeremy Grant. This offseason could be crucial to the benefit or the detriment of the Detroit Pistons moving forward. That is my thoughts on what's next for the Detroit Pistons. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more NBA content. I thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.